Book 9 on the long list. We aren't slowing down, we're speeding up. This book is My Friends by Hisham Matar. Of all the books on the long list, I believe that My Friends was probably the one that had the highest profile going into the long list. It had won the Orwell Prize, and I think that had happened beforehand, but either way, it was a book that was on a lot of people's radar. This book is about a man named Khaled who travels to study in London, and while he is there, he is the victim of a terrorist attack. And the rest of the book is him coming to terms with that, and around him in his immediate sphere are his friends, who also react to that tragedy in different ways and go away from him and do different things too. I really thoroughly enjoyed this book, and I thought that it crept up on me a little bit while I was reading it. At the beginning I thought it was okay, but by the end of the book I was left feeling very moved and like a lot of weight had been put on. This book is all about the aftermath, and we see that aftermath in almost day-to-day detail or year-to-year detail from the perspective of Khaled. We have the terrorist event, and then after that I love how drawn out the next few decades are from this character's perspective as we see everything that he did and everything his friends did. And while we're reading that, and even though it can be quite sort of boring and granular, you still have the event in the back of your mind that you're using to relate to why Khaled is doing certain things. The terrorist incident in the book is not treated like the culmination of something, and the book regularly addresses that there won't be a typical or normal ending to anything. Life has to continue after something that feels like a climax, and that's brought full circle in the ending of the book. I thought the description of the shooting itself, which happens early on in the book, was very disturbing, and I love that when the narrator gets shot, his thoughts kind of detach and he focuses on other things. The first 100 pages of the book are jumping around a lot, and then once you get to that event, the book is written with this really sort of intense immediacy, and that then carries through the back 3/4 of the book from there. I thought that he was an extremely talented and piercing writer with no delusions of what he's doing and no sense of pretentiousness at all. I thought he was very clear. And the narrator of the book has this very sort of intelligent and reserved voice that I really grew to appreciate. Normally I hate listening to audiobooks because it's just not my jam. I can't be getting on with it, but I think that this book is so cleanly written and beautiful that I could probably do it for this one. But I will say that the first 4 chapters of this book are unbelievably hard to follow. I think it's very bold to start a book where the first 20 pages are just incomprehensible. The author was so great at making me sympathize with the main character in a way that didn't feel unnatural or forced or kind of pathetic. The scenes where he is with the girl Hannah are succinct, but you feel a real sense of peace while you're reading it, and that peace doesn't feel sort of ham-fisted or pushed through by the writer. And there's lots of great moments like the scene where Hosam admits that he was at the shooting too, where the book just feels incredibly sincere. And Hosam was such a great character too, so eloquent. I could imagine an audiobook reading out his dialogue in a very sort of silky smooth voice. It was very nice. To give my interpretation of the book a little, I think the author was very heavily playing with the idea that the 3 people in the book, Khaled and his 2 friends, all 3 were kind of meant to be the same person. And when I say that, I mean that the book has this very specific goal, which is it has these 3 people who are at this event, and then the book shows how these 3 people react to the event in the long term in different ways. And the book totally succeeded in that, and I thought it was a really interesting path to follow. And so the fact that the book is kind of written like a memoir is interesting to me as a result. I think the book proposes choices for the main characters like, go back to Libya, fight, stay at home and be safe and protect your family. And I think the book does a really good job at laying out in specific detail why none of these choices are the wrong one. The author had a very humane view for the way that choices play out under a dictatorship and their regime. And seeing the Arab Spring from the other side of the world through a character who can't get home or doesn't want to get home is a very interesting and poignant place to be in. I've seen people criticize the main character in this book as being agentless. Okay, when we get to a book like Enlightenment, right, the reason why it's annoying that those characters are agentless is because it's clear that the author doesn't give a fuck about the characters, and they're just there to make her points and make the writing sound pretty. Here the author is clearly using the main character's frozen attitude to make points for the book itself, that him being agentless is part of it. And I know people who are criticizing the book are aware of that, but I'm just saying that that's why I prefer this kind of agentless to a book like Held, or Orbital, or Enlightenment, enlightenment. The title of the book is literally My Friends. The book is not about Khaled. The book is about all the people around him and what they represent. The main character becomes representative of everything that the other characters are thinking about, and that comes into full view in the back half of the book. And in the front half, the book is kind of concealing that fact until you get to the back half and you realize that the other two characters are kind of the ones you're meant to be thinking about. Mustafa going off the deep end is signposted, and Hosam being kind of the most important person to the book is signposted. The book feels like it should be written through Hosam's eyes, but it's not, and that's very deliberate. Khaled represents the trauma and paranoia that accompanies these terroristic events, and the fact that the other two characters were involved in that means that they are in some ways thinking about things to a lesser degree than Khaled is. They have Khaled's viewpoint in the back of their mind, kind of like a voice in the back of their head. And this whole book is from the point of view, essentially, of trauma and paranoia looking outwards. Of course, the character is frustrating and you want him to better his situation over 400 pages, but the book really takes its time to illustrate why he can't or won't. And there's lots of great symbolism throughout the book to recognize that. There's the story of the cat at the beginning, which I think is a symbol of the main character's agency. The person in that short story saying no at the ending isn't like a firm or angry no, it's just a recognition of a place that's gone too far. As I said, the book is also playing with the idea that the main character ceases to become the main character in the back half of the book. One of his friends becomes this battle-hardened soldier who, as I said, goes off the deep end and becomes like a war general, and the other one becomes this kind of poet at war that is often the viewpoint for some of these conflicts. One of them becomes hardened, the other one remains aware and human, and Khaled represents all of the trauma and baggage that they left behind in London that they are clearly still thinking about. I was enjoying the book for the first half in a little bit of a passive way, but by the second half I was really feeling the weight of what the author was trying to communicate, and I had no problem with sort of bearing his choices, because I felt like they were all leading to quite big points. It all feels so fine-tuned and like every scene is necessary, even though the book is drawn out. The ending of the book comes on you really suddenly after the death of Qaddafi. It's only about 20 pages until the end of the book. And in those 20 pages, every single moment is incredibly important and you need all of them. And when you read that ending, you realize that the whole book has been written like that. Yeah, it might be an unpopular belief, but I think that there's very little fat on this book, and there was never really a point when my interest dipped. I fucking love the ending of this book too, the last couple of paragraphs. At the end, he says to the reader, "I've decided to visit my parents." And, you know, throughout the whole book, he's racked with this sort of indecision, and you don't know how he's really going to change. And when he says, "I'm gonna go visit my parents," you go, yeah, right, you're not going to. And then the final couple of paragraphs is him going back to his flat and he starts this monotonous existence again. But the ending of the book, the very last line is him making his bed before he does anything else. That last line shows that Khaled is capable of action now after the end of the regime, and he is manifesting that in the smallest, subtlest way for the audience to see. It's fucking, oh, I love it. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. So far it's dead even with Wandering Stars for me in terms of what I want to win. I think I would give Wandering Stars the edge on what's going to win because My Friends won the Orwell Prize. I know the Booker judges shouldn't look at that as a reason not to give it to My Friends, but they will.